My name is Mindy Barrett, 35 years old, and a marketing executive who was adopted at age 3. Despite my success, I always felt like an outsider in my wealthy adoptive family. When my father Richard turned 65, we planned a celebration at an upscale restaurant. I was excited, hoping this would finally bring us together as a real family. Little did I know my sister Amanda had other plans. Her lifelong resentment would culminate in a $4,270 bill that changed everything forever. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and the courage to stand up for yourself. I became part of the Barrett family when I was just 3 years old. My birth parents died in a car accident, leaving me with no other relatives willing to take me in. The social worker told me years later that I was incredibly fortunate that Richard and Eleanor Barrett chose me from dozens of children at the adoption agency. Richard was already making his mark as a financial consultant for tech companies, and Eleanor came from old money, her family name adorning buildings across the city. When I arrived at their sprawling colonial home, I carried nothing but a small backpack with a tattered teddy bear and a photo of my birth parents. Eleanor had prepared a beautiful bedroom for me with a canopy bed and shelves filled with dolls and books. Richard knelt down to my eye level that first day and promised, "This is your forever home now, Mindy." Their biological daughter Amanda was 5 at the time. I remember her peering at me from behind Eleanor's legs, her eyes narrowing when her parents weren't looking. That first night, she came into my new room and whispered, "Those aren't your toys. They're just letting you borrow them. Nothing here is really yours." Despite Amanda's coldness, Richard and Eleanor tried their best to make me feel included. They enrolled me in the same prestigious private school, as Amanda bought me similar clothes and included me in all family photos and vacations. But there was always a subtle difference in how they treated us. Amanda was their princess while I was their special project. They celebrated her mediocre report cards effusively, while my straight A's were expected. When I won academic competitions, Richard would say things like, "See how hard Mindy works. That's because she knows what it means to have nothing." These comments, though well-intended, only widened the gap between Amanda and me. As we entered adolescence, her resentment grew more obvious. She would accidentally spill drinks on my homework, spread rumors about me being bought at school, and make sure I was excluded from birthday party invitations. When I made the honor roll in 8th grade, I returned home to find my certificate torn to pieces in my bedroom. Instead of letting Amanda's behavior defeat me, I channeled my energy into excellence. I earned a full scholarship to an Ivy League university, while Amanda barely graduated high school and needed her father's connections to get into a decent college. I worked summer internships and built an impressive resume, while Amanda spent summers at the family's lake house with friends. By the time we reached our 30s, our lives had diverged significantly. I had built a successful career in marketing, rising to executive level at a respected firm. I purchased my own apartment downtown, established financial independence, and created a circle of loyal friends. Amanda, meanwhile, had bounced between jobs. Her parents arranged for her, had a failed marriage to a man from their country club, and still relied on monthly allowances from Richard. Despite our differences, I never gave up hope for a genuine connection with my adoptive family. Each holiday, each birthday, I would show up with thoughtful gifts and genuine smiles, only to endure Amanda's subtle digs and Eleanor's polite but distant affection. Richard remained my strongest advocate, though he was often oblivious to the undercurrents between his daughters. 2 months before the fateful dinner, Amanda surprised me with an invitation for coffee. "I think we should try to get along better," she said, stirring her latte. "Dad's getting older, and I know it bothers him that we're not closer." I was skeptical but hopeful. We began texting occasionally, sharing brief updates about our lives. She complimented my recent promotion, and I congratulated her on a charity event she'd organized. The ice between us seemed to be thawing ever so slightly. Then came Richard's health scare. A minor heart attack that left no permanent damage but served as a wake-up call for the entire family. As he recovered in the hospital, Eleanor decided his upcoming 65th birthday deserved a special celebration. We need to show Richard how much he means to all of us, she declared already, planning an elaborate dinner at Oriole, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Family and close friends only. Something meaningful. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to believe that this could be a turning point for our family. Richard's brush with mortality seemed to have softened everyone's edges. Even Amanda hugged me in the hospital waiting room, whispering, "We need to make this birthday special for Dad." I nodded, squeezing her hand, thinking perhaps we had finally found common ground in our love for the man who had given us both a home. How terribly wrong I was. As the date of my father's birthday celebration approached, I threw myself into preparations with genuine excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect, especially my gift. For months I had been secretly working with a vintage watch dealer to locate the exact Patek Philippe model Richard had once pointed out in a magazine, saying it reminded him of one his grandfather had owned. The price was steep, $20,000, that significantly dented my savings, but the moment I secured it, I knew it was worth every penny. I could already imagine the look on his face when he opened the carefully crafted wooden box. Shopping for the perfect outfit proved more challenging. I wanted to look sophisticated, yet appropriate for a family celebration. After trying on countless dresses, I settled on a midnight blue sheath dress, with a modest neckline and subtle beading around the waist. I splurged on new heels and a clutch to match, wanting for once to feel completely comfortable among Eleanor's socialite friends, who would inevitably be dripping in designer labels. A week before the dinner, Eleanor called to discuss logistics. "We've reserved the private dining room at Oriole," she explained. "The chef is preparing a special 7-course tasting menu with wine pairings. Richard will be so surprised." "That sounds wonderful," I replied. "How many people are we expecting?" "Just 20 or so. Close family and Richard's oldest friends. I've arranged for a photographer to capture the evening. You know how Richard pretends to hate that sort of thing, but secretly loves having the memories." Eleanor sounded tired but excited. I offered to help with any remaining details, but she assured me everything was under control. "Just bring yourself and that lovely smile of yours," she said before hanging up. 2 days before the dinner, Amanda called, her voice uncharacteristically warm. "Mindy, I was thinking we should have drinks before dinner on Saturday, just you and me. A little sister time before all the chaos." The invitation caught me off guard. "That would be nice," I said cautiously. "Great, meet me at the lounge at 6. The reservation is at 8, so that gives us plenty of time to catch up." When Saturday arrived, I spent hours getting ready, blow-drying my hair into loose waves and applying my makeup with extra care. As I fastened my mother's pearl earrings, a gift from my 16th birthday, I allowed myself to imagine a new chapter in our family story, one where Amanda and I might actually become friends. The lounge was an upscale bar attached to Oriole, with dim lighting and plush velvet seating. Amanda was already there when I arrived, looking stunning in a red designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Mindy." She stood to greet me with air kisses. "You look nice. Very appropriate." I ignored the slight undercurrent in her compliment. "Thanks, Amanda. You look beautiful too." She ordered champagne for both of us, insisting we toast to family. As the bubbly flowed, Amanda became increasingly nostalgic, recounting childhood memories I had almost forgotten. For a moment it felt genuine, as if we were truly bonding. "Remember that summer at Cape Cod when Dad tried to teach us both to sail?" She laughed. "You were so determined to get it right." "I was always trying to prove I belonged," I admitted. Something flickered across her face. "Yes, well, that must have been difficult." She took another sip of champagne. "Speaking of belonging, what did you get Dad for his birthday?" When I mentioned the vintage watch, her smile tightened slightly. "Oh, that's sweet. I went with something a bit more substantial. But I'm sure he'll appreciate the sentiment of yours too." As we finished our drinks, Amanda's phone kept buzzing with texts. She excused herself twice to make calls, returning the second time, with an odd satisfaction in her expression. "I hope you don't mind, but I invited a few additional guests tonight. Dad's old college roommate just flew in from London, and the Whitakers are in town from Palm Beach. They specifically asked about you, actually." I frowned, remembering the Whitakers as particularly snobbish friends of Eleanor's, who had always treated me with thinly veiled disdain. I thought Eleanor wanted to keep it intimate. Amanda waved dismissively. Mom always says that, but Dad loves a crowd. Trust me, it'll be fine. As we prepared to move to the main restaurant, I noticed Amanda having an intense conversation with the restaurant manager near the bar. She was gesturing emphatically, and I caught phrases like separate arrangement and bill handling. When she saw me watching, she quickly wrapped up the conversation and looped her arm through mine. Ready to celebrate our wonderful father, she asked brightly, but the warmth didn't reach her eyes. A knot formed in my stomach as we walked toward the private dining room. Something felt off, but I pushed the feeling aside. This night was about Richard, not about my complicated relationship with Amanda. I would stay positive for his sake, even as warning bells began to sound in the back of my mind. The manager led us through the main restaurant toward the private room. I could see Richard and Eleanor already seated at the head of a long, elegantly set table surrounded by familiar faces from throughout Richard's life. The room was stunning with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. White roses and lilies adorned every surface and champagne flowed freely. There they are. My girls. Richard beamed when he spotted us rising from his seat with arms outstretched. For this moment at least, everything felt perfect. If only it could have stayed that way. The private dining room at Oriole exuded luxury from every angle. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over damask tablecloths and gleaming silverware. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering city skyline, and soft classical music played in the background. The main table arranged in a U-shape seated about 20 people with Richard and Eleanor at the center. As I entered behind Amanda, Richard's face lit up. At 65, he still commanded attention, his silver hair and tailored suit giving him the distinguished look of a man who had earned his success. He stood immediately arms wide. There they are, my beautiful daughters. He embraced us both, kissing our cheeks. Now the party can really begin. I noticed several unfamiliar faces around the table, confirming Amanda had indeed invited more than a few extra guests. The room now held closer to 30 people, all dressed impeccably and sipping champagne. I recognized the Whitakers, the elderly couple who had been friends with Eleanor's family for generations, along with several of Richard's business associates and their wives. Eleanor rose to greet us, elegant as always in a navy dress and pearls. Mindy, darling, you look lovely. Her hug was brief but genuine. We've just started with aperitifs. As guests settled back into their seats, I scanned the table for my place card. Strangely, I couldn't find it anywhere along the U-shaped main table. Amanda had already slipped into a seat next to Eleanor, leaving me standing awkwardly. A server approached. Miss Barrett, your seat is right this way. He led me toward a small round table positioned several feet away from the main arrangement near the service entrance. A single-place setting waited there, isolated from everyone else. Confused, I looked back at the main table. There must be some mistake. I should be seated with my family. Amanda's voice carried clearly across the room. Oh, Mindy, we had to make some last-minute changes with all the additional guests. I'm sure you don't mind. I walked back to the main table, maintaining my composure, despite my growing discomfort. I'd really prefer to sit with the family, especially for Dad's birthday. Perhaps we could add a chair. Amanda's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. The seating has been arranged. Why don't you go find another table? You're not really family anyway. The room fell silent. Forks paused midair. A waiter nearly dropped a tray of drinks. Richard looked confused. Amanda, what are you talking about? Before he could say more, Amanda laughed lightly and touched his arm. Daddy, I'm just teasing. You know how sensitive Mindy can be. But seriously, the chef planned everything for exactly this many at the main table. We can't disrupt the service now. Eleanor glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to create a scene. Mindy, perhaps just for tonight. We'll all be mingling during dessert anyway. I felt every eye in the room on me. Making a scene would only ruin Richard's birthday. Swallowing both my pride and my hurt, I nodded stiffly and returned to the isolated table feeling like a child banished to the corner. As the first course arrived, a delicate scallop crudo with citrus and microgreens, I could hear Amanda holding court at the main table. She was telling stories about family vacations from before I was adopted, emphasizing our family traditions and our bloodline at every opportunity. Remember that Christmas at grandmother's when we all wore the Barrett family tartan? Of course, that was before Mindy came along. Those photos are priceless family heirlooms now. I focused on my food though, each bite tasted like cardboard. From my isolated position, I could see Richard enjoying himself, oblivious to Amanda's calculated exclusion tactics. Eleanor occasionally glanced my way with apologetic eyes, but made no move to intervene. As the second course arrived, a truffle risotto that normally would have delighted me, I overheard one of the Whitakers asking Amanda about inheritance matters. So is the Barrett Trust still divided traditionally, or have there been adjustments for different circumstances? The elderly woman's eyes flicked briefly in my direction. Blood always tells in the end, Mrs. Whitaker Amanda replied loud enough for me to hear. Some arrangements are just formalities, not true legacies. I pulled out my phone, desperate for some connection that didn't sting. Several colleagues had texted me good wishes for the evening. My friend Jessica sent hope the family dinner goes well. Remember, you're amazing no matter what she says. Jessica had witnessed Amanda's behavior at my 30th birthday party and understood the dynamic all too well. Her message brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. The main course featured aged Wagyu beef with seasonal vegetables and a red wine reduction. Amanda had apparently ordered several $3,000 bottles of Chateau Petrus for the table, making a show of having the sommelier explain its rarity. When the server came to pour a glass for me at my separate table, Amanda intervened. "Oh, I think house wine is fine for that table. Let's save the special bottles for the main party." The server looked mortified but followed her instruction. I waved him away, entirely preferring water to the further humiliation of house wine. Throughout the meal, Amanda strategically blocked Richard's view of me whenever he seemed about to look in my direction or include me in conversation. She kept him engaged with a parade of his old friends, childhood stories, and business discussions. By the fourth course, a palate-cleansing sorbet, the pattern was clear to everyone in the room. I was being deliberately ostracized at what should have been a family celebration. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others seemed morbidly fascinated by the drama, and a few of the older, more traditional couples appeared to approve of Amanda's tactics. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. "Are you okay? Do you need an emergency escape call?" I typed back quickly, "Staying for Dad. We'll explain later." Because despite the humiliation, I couldn't bring myself to walk out on Richard's birthday. He had been my rock through childhood, the one who always made time to attend my school events even when Eleanor couldn't be bothered. He had helped me move into my first apartment and called weekly just to check in. Whatever his blindness to Amanda's behavior, he didn't deserve to have his celebration ruined. So I sat at my lonely table, maintaining a dignified expression, and endured course after course of exquisite food that I could barely taste through the lump in my throat, all while watching the real family celebration unfold without me just a few feet and an unbridgeable chasm away. By the time the dessert course was announced, I had reached a state of numb resignation. The chef himself emerged from the kitchen to present an elaborate chocolate sculpture in the shape of a sailboat, a nod to Richard's favorite hobby. The entire room applauded as servers wheeled in a cart, laden with additional desserts and after-dinner drinks. And now, the chef announced we have prepared a special champagne toast for the birthday celebration. Amanda immediately stood up. "I've arranged for something extra special." She gestured to a server who appeared with several bottles of Dom Perignon Rosé, the 2005 vintage Dad's favorite year. At nearly $1,000 per bottle, this unnecessary extravagance raised eyebrows even among the wealthy crowd. Richard looked slightly uncomfortable. "Amanda, that's too much." "Nothing is too much for my father," she declared, making pointed emphasis on my. As the champagne was poured for everyone at the main table, Amanda orchestrated a series of toasts. Each family friend stood to share memories of Richard while I remained isolated at my little table, not even invited to raise a glass. When the toasts concluded, Eleanor gently suggested it was time for gifts. "Richard has specifically requested no presents," she explained to the guests, but of course, his daughters didn't listen. Amanda immediately jumped up, producing an enormous box wrapped in silver paper. "Daddy, this is from me, from your real daughter." The emphasis made several guests shift uncomfortably. Richard unwrapped the gift to reveal a limited edition golf set with platinum inlaid clubs. "These are extraordinary," he said, clearly impressed, though not quite connecting with the gift on a personal level. Richard had played golf perhaps 3 times in his life, preferring sailing and tennis. "Only 50 sets were made worldwide," Amanda announced. "I had to call in serious favors to get this for you." Richard thanked her with a hug, then looked around expectantly. "And is there something from Mindy too?" All eyes turned to me. For a moment, Amanda looked panicked, as if she had hoped everyone would forget I was there. I rose from my isolated table and approached with the small, elegantly wrapped box containing the vintage watch. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said softly, placing it in his hands. Before he could unwrap it, Amanda interjected, "Oh, it looks so tiny compared to my gift. But I guess it's the thought that counts, right? Even if the thought is economical." Several guests tittered nervously. I stepped back, letting Richard open the gift without further comment. His hand stilled when he saw the watch nestled in its velvet box. "Is this?" "I can't believe it." "It's the Patek Philippe you pointed out years ago," I explained. "The one that reminded you of your grandfather's watch." Richard's eyes grew misty. "I only mentioned that once, maybe 10 years ago. You remembered all this time." He stood and embraced me tightly, whispering, "This is the most thoughtful gift I've ever received." I could feel Amanda seething behind us. As Richard proudly showed the watch to several close friends, explaining its significance, Amanda drained her champagne and signaled for another bottle. By now she was visibly intoxicated, her movements less coordinated and her voice louder than appropriate. When Richard returned to his seat, still admiring the watch, Amanda couldn't contain herself. "Well, it's nice to see charity case gifts can sometimes hit the mark," she slurred just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Maybe adoption agencies should include gift selection skills in their placement criteria." Eleanor gasped, "Amanda, that's enough." But Amanda was past the point of restraint. She stood unsteadily, champagne sloshing in her glass. "You know what, I think it's time we acknowledged what everyone in this room knows but never says. The Barrett family has always been Richard, Eleanor, and me. Mindy was Dad's charity project, the stray he picked up because it made him feel good about himself." The room fell completely silent. Richard's face darkened with a rage I had never seen before. "Amanda, stop, right now." "Why?" "Because it's impolite to state the obvious. She's not a Barrett. She never was. She's been trying to buy her way into this family for 30 years, and it's pathetic." As she continued her tirade, a server appeared beside my isolated table. He placed a black leather folder in front of me. "The bill, madam, as requested." Confused, I opened it to find an itemized check for $4,270. The entire party's expenses, including Amanda's extravagant wine selections, had been charged to me. I looked up at the server in disbelief. There must be some mistake. Amanda's laughter cut through the room. "No mistake. I arranged it earlier." "Oh, don't look so surprised, everyone. She's used to paying for love. Isn't that right, Mindy? Always trying to buy your way into places you don't belong." Every person in the restaurant seemed to freeze. Richard half rose from his seat, but before he could speak, I stood up. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor echoed in the silence. Everyone watched, waiting to see what the rejected adopted daughter would do. Amanda smirked, certain she had finally broken me, certain I would either cry or storm out, confirming every narrative she had crafted about me being unstable and unworthy. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, picked up the bill, and smiled. Standing there with the obscene bill in my hand, I felt a strange calm descend over me. In that crystal-clear moment, I saw the pattern that had defined my entire life with the Barretts. I had spent 30 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. 30 years accepting scraps of affection and calling it a feast. 30 years allowing Amanda to define my worth in this family. No more. I walked deliberately to the main table, aware of every eye on me. The restaurant had grown so quiet that my heels clicking against the floor echoed like thunderclaps. "I'd like to see an itemized breakdown of this bill, please," I said to the hovering server, my voice steady and professional. He hurried to comply, returning with a detailed printout. I studied it carefully, then addressed the entire room without raising my voice. "This bill includes 5 bottles of Dom Perignon Rosé at $890 each, 3 bottles of Chateau Petrus at $3,000 each, and an off-menu truffle supplement at $400 per person." I looked directly at Amanda. Interesting choices for someone who maxed out 3 credit cards last month and had to ask me for a personal loan of $7,000 to cover her rent. Amanda's face drained of color. That's a lie. I removed an envelope from my clutch and placed it on the table. "Here's a copy of the check I wrote you, Amanda, and a copy of our text exchange where you begged me not to tell Mom and Dad about your financial troubles. The original is in my safe deposit box." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Eleanor turned to Amanda in shock. "You told us everything was fine with your finances. You said the boutique was thriving." Amanda's boutique, funded entirely by Richard and Eleanor, had been hemorrhaging money for years, though she maintained a facade of success. Her eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal's. "This isn't about me," she sputtered. "This is about her trying to buy her way into our family again." "No, Amanda," I replied calmly. "This is about truth, something this family has been sorely lacking." I turned to face Richard and Eleanor directly. "I have loved you both since I was 3 years old. I have spent my life trying to earn a place in this family, believing that if I was just good enough, successful enough, generous enough, I would finally belong. But I see now that was never going to happen as long as Amanda felt threatened by my existence." Richard tried to interject, but I gently raised my hand. "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." I addressed the room again. Family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about who shows up for you, who celebrates your victories, and helps you through defeats. It's about love that doesn't come with conditions or price tags. I removed a credit card from my wallet and handed it to the server. "I'll pay for my meal, which comes to $120 with wine pairing, and for my father's portion as my gift to him. The rest should be divided among the actual hosts of this event." Amanda lunged forward, nearly toppling a champagne flute. "You can't do that. You're trying to humiliate me." "No, Amanda. You arranged this bill to humiliate me. I'm simply declining to participate in that plan." I turned back to Richard, who was watching me with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. I reached into my clutch and removed a second smaller envelope. "Dad, I have one more gift for you. One I wasn't planning to give tonight, but now seems appropriate." Richard opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was documentation of a trust fund I had established for his retirement, seeded with $50,000 from my savings. "I started this last year," I explained. "I know you're financially secure, but I wanted to create something that showed my appreciation for everything you've done for me." What I didn't mention was that I had originally created a joint trust for both Richard and Eleanor, but discovered Amanda had secretly borrowed against their existing retirement accounts, depleting significant portions without their knowledge. My financial advisor had helped me structure this new trust to be protected from such interference. Richard studied the documents, his financial expertise, quickly grasping what I had done and why. His eyes met mine, filled with understanding and regret. Then he looked at Amanda, seeing her clearly, perhaps for the first time. "You took money from our accounts?" he asked quietly. Amanda's face contorted. "It was a temporary loan. I was going to pay it back. This is exactly what she wants, turning you against your real daughter." Eleanor reached for the trust documentation, reading it carefully. "Mindy, this is extraordinarily generous. But how did you know about our accounts being depleted?" "My financial advisor noticed discrepancies when I consulted him about setting up your trust. The withdrawals had Amanda's electronic signature." Richard stood slowly, his birthday celebration forgotten. "Amanda, we're going to discuss this at home, in detail." For the first time that night, Amanda looked frightened. Her carefully constructed world of privilege without responsibility was crumbling around her. She made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Are you really going to believe her over me?" After everything we've been through as a real family, she's trying to buy your love, and you're falling for it." Richard's response was measured, but firm. "No, Amanda. Mindy isn't trying to buy love. She's showing love in the way she always has, through thoughtfulness and generosity. Something you might consider learning from her." As the reality of her situation sank, in Amanda's eyes filled with angry tears, the perfect princess facade cracked completely, revealing the insecure, entitled woman beneath. For the first time in our lives, I didn't feel triumph at her distress, only a profound sadness for what might have been, had she been able to see me as a sister rather than a threat. I stepped back from the table, my purpose accomplished. "I should go. Please enjoy the rest of your birthday, Dad." Richard shook his head firmly. "No, you're not going anywhere." He turned to the hovering restaurant manager. "Please add another chair to the main table. My daughter will be joining us for the remainder of the evening." As a server hurried to comply, placing a chair directly beside Richard, I felt 30 years of exclusion begin to lift from my shoulders. Not because I was finally being given a place at the literal table, but because I had claimed my own worth without apology or permission. In that moment, standing tall amid the wreckage of Amanda's cruel plan, I was finally free. The remainder of the evening unfolded with the strangest mixture of celebration and tension I had ever experienced. The staff quickly rearranged the seating, placing me beside Richard at the main table. Amanda remained, though she had fallen into a sullen silence, occasionally shooting venomous glares in my direction. The restaurant manager approached our table, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Barrett, regarding the bill situation." Richard waved him over and spoke quietly. I caught fragments about separate checks and apologized for the confusion. The manager nodded repeatedly before hurrying away, visibly relieved to have a clear resolution. While guests attempted to resume normal conversation, the atmosphere remained strained. Several of Eleanor's friends made awkward excuses and departed early. Others, particularly Richard's business associates, made a point of coming to speak with me, expressing admiration for my grace under pressure and exchanging business cards. Mrs. Whitaker, who had earlier participated in Amanda's exclusionary tactics, approached me during the coffee service. "My dear, I feel I owe you an apology. I've known your sister since she was a child, and I allowed her version of events to color my perception." She patted my hand with her bejeweled fingers. "You handled yourself with remarkable dignity tonight." Throughout it all, Richard kept me close his hand, occasionally squeezing mine under the table. His birthday celebration had been irreparably altered, yet he seemed almost relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted. As the evening finally wound down, the restaurant manager discreetly confirmed that Richard had settled the bill properly. Amanda, now sobered by the turn of events, attempted to leave quietly, but Eleanor firmly instructed her to join us in the family car. The ride home was excruciating. Amanda stared out the window, refusing to acknowledge anyone. Eleanor seemed lost in thought, occasionally sighing deeply. Richard broke the silence as we approached my apartment building. "Mindy, would you come back to the house with us? I think we have a lot to discuss as a family." Part of me wanted to decline to go home to my peaceful apartment and decompress from the emotional battlefield of the evening, but I recognized this invitation for what it was, a long overdue reckoning. "Of course, Dad." The Barrett family home was a colonial masterpiece in an exclusive neighborhood, its manicured lawn and imposing facade, a testament to generations of wealth. As children, Amanda and I had raced through its many rooms, playing elaborate games of hide and seek. As teens, we had retreated to opposite wings, avoiding each other whenever possible. Now, as adults, we entered its grand foyer like combatants, entering a neutral zone for negotiations. Richard led us to the formal living room, a space usually reserved for entertaining important guests. "Sit down, please, all of you." Amanda immediately took the antique Queen Anne chair that had always been her favorite, while Eleanor perched on the edge of the sofa. I chose a leather armchair near the fireplace, remembering how Richard used to read stories to me in that very spot when I was small. Richard remained standing, looking older than he had just hours ago. "I need to say something to all of you, but especially to you, Mindy." He took a deep breath. "I have failed you as a father." This was the last thing I expected. "Dad, no." He held up his hand. Please let me finish. When we adopted you, I promised to give you a family and a home where you would always feel loved and valued. Tonight made it painfully clear that I've broken that promise. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We both have, darling. Richard continued. I told myself that Amanda's behavior was just normal sibling rivalry. I convinced myself that you were strong enough to handle it, that you didn't need me to intervene. I was wrong, and my cowardice has allowed this situation to fester for decades. Amanda made a scoffing sound. So now I'm the villain in this family drama. Perfect Mindy has finally won. Richard turned to her, his expression firm. This isn't about winning or losing, Amanda. This is about the fact that you deliberately tried to humiliate your sister tonight. You arranged for her to receive a bill for an entire party she wasn't even properly invited to join. You made cruel comments about her adoption, something she had no control over. And apparently you've been lying to your mother and me about serious financial issues while borrowing money from Mindy behind our backs. Amanda's face flushed. She's twisting everything I was going to pay her back. That's not the point. Richard rarely raised his voice, and the outburst startled all of us. The point is that you've been treating Mindy like an outsider since the day she arrived, and instead of correcting that behavior, we enabled it. Eleanor finally found her voice. Amanda, I need to understand something. Why tonight? Why go to such lengths to hurt your sister at your father's birthday celebration? Amanda looked trapped. Her eyes darted between her parents before settling on me with naked hostility. Because she's taking everything. Dad's always loved her more, and now she's showing up with that perfect gift, and her perfect career, and her perfect life. She even had to rescue me financially, which she conveniently mentioned, in front of everyone. Her voice broke. I'm supposed to be the daughter, the real Barrett, but she's replaced me in every way that matters. The raw pain in her voice was startling. Beneath all the cruelty and manipulation was a frightened little girl who had never stopped feeling threatened by my presence. I never wanted to replace you, Amanda, I said quietly. I just wanted to be your sister. Richard moved to sit beside Eleanor on the sofa. Amanda, your position in this family has never been in jeopardy. Our love for you is unconditional, and always has been. But that same unconditional love extends to Mindy. She is every bit as much our daughter as you are. We should have addressed this years ago, Eleanor admitted. We thought we were helping by not making a fuss, by pretending everything was normal. We failed you both. Amanda's phone began ringing incessantly. She glanced at it, her expression shifting from anger to panic. Amanda, Richard questioned. What's happening? She swallowed hard. Nothing. Just some friends checking in. Eleanor reached for the phone. These aren't friend calls at 1 a.m. What's going on? After a brief struggle, Eleanor gained possession of the phone and saw the screen. These are all from your business partner and your accountant. Why would they be calling at this hour? Amanda stood abruptly. I need to go. This is all too much drama for one night. Sit down, Richard said firmly. What financial trouble are you really in, Amanda? The full truth this time. The unraveling happened quickly after that. Through tears and recriminations, Amanda finally admitted the boutique had been failing for over a year. She had taken the loans from our parents' accounts to cover mounting debts, then borrowed from me when that wasn't enough. She had recently turned to less reputable sources for cash, putting up the boutique's assets as collateral for high-interest loans. I was going to fix it before anyone found out, she insisted. The spring collection was going to turn everything around. Richard looked devastated. Why didn't you just come to us for help? Amanda's gaze dropped to the floor. Because Mindy never needs help. She does everything perfectly on her own. I couldn't bear for you to know I was the failure daughter. The realization hit me like a physical blow. While I had spent decades trying to earn my place in the family, Amanda had been desperately trying not to lose hers. We had been trapped in a competition neither of us had created, but both had perpetuated. Richard spent the next hour on the phone, with his financial advisor creating a plan to address Amanda's business crisis. Eleanor made coffee and sandwiches her habitual response to family emergencies. I sat quietly processing 30 years of misunderstandings and missed connections. As dawn approached, we had all reached the limits of emotional endurance. Amanda retreated to her old bedroom without meeting anyone's eyes. Eleanor kissed my cheek before following Richard upstairs, whispering, "We have so much more to talk about, my darling girl. But not tonight." I let myself out as the first rays of sunlight touched the grand old house, feeling both drained and strangely liberated. My phone contained dozens of messages from witnesses to the restaurant drama, some expressing support, others simply reveling in the gossip. I ignored them all and called a rideshare to take me home. As I collapsed into my own bed, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for my worth within the Barrett family, and in doing so had accidentally exposed truths that had been buried for decades. What would emerge from these revelations remained to be seen, but I knew with absolute certainty that none of us could go back to the way things had been before. For better or worse, the fantasy family I had spent my life trying to earn acceptance from had been replaced by real people with real flaws, and somehow that felt more like a beginning than an ending. 1 year has passed since that fateful night at Oriole, and the changes in my life have been profound. The morning after the dinner, I woke to dozens of messages from people who had witnessed Amanda's behavior. Some were genuinely concerned, others simply hungry for gossip. I responded only to those who mattered, assuring them I was all right, and requesting privacy as our family worked through its issues. In those first few weeks, I created distance to process my emotions. I threw myself into work, finding solace in concrete problems I could actually solve. My team noticed the change in me, the newfound assertiveness in meetings, the willingness to stand my ground when challenged. My boss pulled me aside after I successfully negotiated a major contract. "Something's different about you," she observed. "You've always been talented, but now you're owning your worth." She was right. Standing up to Amanda had broken something loose inside me, a lifetime of seeking approval and fearing rejection. When the quarterly review came around, I received a substantial promotion to Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, a position I might have once believed was beyond my reach. My personal life underwent similar transformations. I began spending more time with friends who celebrated my successes rather than tolerated my presence. Jessica, who had sent those supportive texts during the disastrous dinner, became an even closer confidant. She introduced me to her diverse circle of friends, many of whom had complicated family stories of their own. "Blood family is what you're given," Jessica told me over brunch one Sunday. "Chosen family is what you build. Both can be valid, but the second one is entirely in your control." This concept of chosen family resonated deeply. I began hosting monthly dinner parties in my apartment, creating traditions with people who wanted to be there. We celebrated holidays, achievements, and ordinary Tuesdays with equal enthusiasm. For my 36th birthday, they surprised me with a sailing trip, remembering my casual mention of loving the water like my father. As for the Barretts, our relationship entered uncharted territory. Richard called me daily in the beginning, checking in with a regularity that spoke of his determination to repair what had been broken. Our conversations evolved from careful politeness to genuine connection, as we discovered we could speak honestly, without fear of disrupting family harmony. "I've been a coward," he admitted during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "I convinced myself I was keeping the peace, but I was really just avoiding conflict at your expense." Eleanor took longer to adjust her ingrained social programming, making it difficult for her to acknowledge the dysfunction she had helped maintain. But gradually she too began to change. She invited me for lunch at her country club, proudly introducing me to her friends without the qualifiers she had once used. "This is my daughter Mindy," she would say simply. "She's just been promoted at her firm." Amanda's journey proved more complicated. After the financial revelations of that night, she had no choice but to accept Richard's help in restructuring her business debts. The boutique closed temporarily for rebranding, though, in reality, it was to prevent bankruptcy. She entered therapy initially just to appease our parents, but eventually, with genuine commitment to understanding her behavior. 3 months after the dinner, she asked to meet me at a small cafe far from our usual social circles. She arrived without her usual armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup, looking younger and more vulnerable. "I'm not going to apologize," were her first words. I started to stand, but she reached across the table. Wait, please. What I mean is a simple apology would be insulting after everything I've done. Words are easy. I'm trying to do better. We talked for 2 hours that day, not as instant sisters or even as friends, but as two women beginning to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time. She spoke of feeling displaced when I arrived, of building her identity around being the real Barrett daughter because she feared she had nothing else of value to offer. I was 3 when you came, she explained. Old enough to remember being the only child young enough to feel threatened by this new person suddenly getting attention. And you were so determined to be perfect. The harder you tried to fit in, the more I resented you for making it look easy. It was never easy, I told her quietly. I know that now. Or I'm trying to know it. These meetings became a monthly occurrence, each one slightly less tense than the last. We established boundaries that had never existed before, acknowledging that we might never have the close sisterly bond depicted in television shows, but could perhaps build something honest instead. 6 months after the dinner, I used some of my promotion bonus to establish the Barrett Foundation for Adopted Children, a non-profit organization providing educational support and community connection for families with adopted children. The foundation focused particularly on helping siblings navigate the complex emotions that can arise when families blend through adoption. Richard and Eleanor became enthusiastic supporters both financially and as board members. To my surprise, Amanda eventually offered to help as well, designing the foundation's logo and website free of charge. Her boutique had reopened on a smaller scale, with a more sustainable business model that played to her genuine talents in design rather than her pretensions to high fashion. We held our first foundation fundraiser exactly 1 year after that disastrous birthday dinner. Standing at the podium addressing a room full of supporters, I could see my entire journey reflected in the faces before me. Richard and Eleanor proudly displaying the foundation materials, Amanda hanging back but present, Jessica and my chosen family cheering from their table, colleagues who had become friends, and dozens of families with adopted children who might benefit from our work. Family is not defined by blood or legal documents, I told the crowd, echoing the words I had spoken that night at Oriole. It's defined by love, by showing up, by doing the hard work of truly seeing each other. Sometimes that means creating boundaries. Sometimes it means offering second chances. Always it means honoring your own worth while recognizing the humanity in others. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Richard found me alone on the venue's balcony, looking out at the city lights. "I'm so proud of you, Mindy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not because of your success or this foundation, though those are remarkable. I'm proud of who you are, how you've handled everything life has thrown at you with grace and integrity." "I learned that from you," I told him truthfully. He shook his head. "No, I think you came with that built in. We just got lucky enough to have you in our lives." He hesitated, then added, "I know our family isn't what you deserved growing up, but I hope you know how much you matter to me, how much you've always mattered." As we embraced, I caught sight of Amanda watching us from the doorway. For a moment I tensed, expecting the old jealousy to assert itself. Instead, she gave a small, sad smile and turned away, allowing us our moment without interruption. It was a small gesture, but it represented the most significant change of all. That night, lying in bed reflecting on the journey of the past year, I realized that the bill Amanda tried to hand me at Oriole was in many ways the best gift she could have given me. It forced a confrontation that had been brewing for 30 years. It compelled me to finally stand up for my own worth. It shattered illusions but created space for something more authentic to grow. I no longer measure my worth by my place in the Barrett family. I no longer seek validation through achievement or accommodation. The little girl who arrived with nothing but a tattered teddy bear and a desperate need to belong has grown into a woman who knows her value is inherent, not earned. Family remains complicated. Amanda and I may never fully trust each other. Eleanor still occasionally slips into old patterns. Richard sometimes tries too hard to compensate for the past. But we are all more honest now, more willing to acknowledge the complex emotions that bind us together. And beyond the Barrett family, I have built connections based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I have learned that belonging doesn't always look like I imagined it would, that sometimes it comes in unexpected forms with unexpected people. The $4,270 bill that was meant to humiliate me became the price of my freedom instead, and that, as it turns out, was a bargain. Have you ever had a moment when standing up for yourself completely changed the dynamics of a relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of finding self-worth, despite rejection, resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories of overcoming family struggles. Remember that your worth is never determined by others' treatment of you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives you courage in your own.